Hey, Wes Spence here, your host of Scar Tissue. We have an amazing guest today, Mr. Eddie Lawson, legend motorcycle racer. Eddie, I first heard of Eddie back in 1988 when I first got into the Navy. I had multiple friends who were big motorcycle fanatics and got me kind of going into that world. And Eddie Lawson was one of basically their heroes at the time. And so, of course, I read a lot of things about Eddie. One, he's four-time world champion. He's won multiple, I think 31, when at the time you retired, 31 championships that you had won over the course of your career. And basically, these guys made me aware of what an incredible person as a racer that Eddie was. Now today, before I introduce or bring Eddie onto the show here officially, what we're going to be looking at are how he did what he did. And we're not going to be so much into the mechanics of it, although we'll definitely discuss the beautiful bike sitting here and the other one sitting over there, just because they're part of his history. But what we're really after is how Eddie mentally prepared, some of the lessons learned, a lot of the lessons learned that he had, both good and the ones that were challenges, and basically get a gander at what made Eddie tick, and hopefully you guys can glean some of those lessons learned to be used in your life. And so without further ado, let's introduce Mr. Eddie Lawson. Eddie, thank you so much for hosting us here.
Appreciate it.
And really cool to be with you today.
Yeah, same here. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. And so like I did with a couple other people we've talked to, let's always start with the beginning. You were born and raised in Upland, California, right?
I was, and kind of grew up in a motorsports family. I did grow up in a motorsports family. My grandfather raced motorcycles. My dad was into drag racing, and we were always going to races every weekend, it seemed like, and from just a little kid. And I think that was completely different from most families. Motorcycles were dangerous, and you shouldn't do this, and it was just the opposite. My dad was, I'd tell my mom, we're going to go ride and we'll be back later. And that's how it was. That's how I grew up. So pretty fun to grow up that way. My grandfather was always taking us out to the desert. And I was on either it was a go-kart or a motorcycle or, something that was going fast all the time. So
what did they start you out with when you I think you got your first motorcycle, you said at 7, I believe, right?
7 years old.
Now, leading up to that, what were you riding before you got to that point?
Well, mainly, my grandfather got my dad into bike racing, and they would go to the desert and race out in the desert near Southern California. Right. And I would just hang out in the pits, and I was either riding a bicycle or some little thing, in the pits, and I'd wait for them to get done, and then later on, it progressed to where I was tall enough because back then they didn't have mini bikes. So it was just a press frame, tall 100cc bike, and I couldn't touch the pegs, but they would plop me on it, and away I'd go. And I'd ride around out there, but I'd fall over and break the levers off, and my grandfather would say, if you break one more lever, I'm not bringing you out here. So I would really do my best to stay up, but sure enough, I'd fall over, but he took me out every weekend.
That's so cool. Now, so as you're riding along, at what point did you go, hey, you know what, this would be cool to actually just start racing for real, right? As a kid, was it about the age of 7 again is when you started racing, or when in there did you
this was early on when I was 12. We did a lot of dirt tracks. Well, my grandfather would always take me to all these dirt tracks to watch if it was a Grand National Championship or whatever. So we started out watching it, but then I was about 12 years old, and he said, would you like to go actually race and try it? I said, yeah, let's go do it. So I was down in Elsinore, Paris. We had many tracks in Southern California we could race at that time.
For the benefit of the audience, so what type of tracks? Was it jumps? Was it just an oval, a little bit of both?
Yeah, TT is it's a smooth track. Yeah. It's not like motocross where there's a lot of bumps. Right. It was very smooth, but you would go over hills and over jumps, and it had left and right turns in it. Mm. So, but it was a lot of fun, and I kind of finished in the back when I first started. And my dad and my grandfather kind of looked at each other and said, this kid's never going to make it. So I started that way. I was very cautious, but there was something inside that I knew, I really had the passion. I loved it. I wanted them to take me out every weekend. It was that. I knew that I loved it. From the very first time I rode a motorcycle, this is the greatest thing I've ever done. So yeah, it just kind of evolved from there, from that as a 12-year-old to just many races and progression, and then later on into professional.
Right. And so what got you transitioned from the dirt track into the actual paved track, if you will?
Right. Well, paved track, I was about 14, and I have this little 50 ITEL jet my grandfather bought me, and it went about 70 miles an hour and scared the heck out of me. But that's kind of how it transitioned. And yeah, it wasn't easy. It was very difficult. Road racing was very precise. It was completely different from what I knew, but I still, that passion and that drive, I loved being on the bike. And
what about it did you really, it was the speed, the maneuverability,
all
or
of it, the concentration especially. Yeah, you had to really concentrate on your lines. If you broke that concentration, you were in the dirt, and that was a bad thing on a road racer.
Now, one of the things we'll talk about a little bit later with that, on that focus, but one I kind of want to mention to the audience, the one thing that really impressed me about you was that despite, all your championships that you've won, you never wrecked.
Well,
that was a story, right?
Well, so, I was probably one of the few that stayed on a little more than the others. I wouldn't say never, but I was kind of down the road a few times. But for the most part, I hated pain, and I just wanted to stay upright. Yeah. So yeah.
At what, were you always, as you're going through, even from the beginning at 7 years old, were you able to avoid, the hard impact dirt, I guess, if you will? Is that kind of? Yeah,
there was something there. I don't think my grandfather or my dad said, you need to do it this particular way. It was just, I really wanted to do it correctly. I think there was something in my brain that said, I want to learn how to do this before I go fast. And I learned maybe, let's do this the right way and then work up to speed.
Okay,
so
all right.
That was kind of my deal anyway.
Okay.
Yeah.
And so at what point did you actually go pro?
Well, so the progression is you start novice, junior, expert in sportsman. And when you accumulate enough points, you start back over again. Professionally, you start back at the bottom, novice.
Understood.
So ran novice class, we won that championship, went to junior, won that championship, and then expert in 79.
And how old were you then?
Oh, I had to be 20, I think, 21, somewhere in there, I think. But yeah, so I was really wanting to do the dirt track thing, run Grand National Championships with the dirt track. Wasn't a lot of money. You could make a decent living, a pretty good living, but it wasn't like road racing. But I was doing some sportsman road racing at the time on a 250, and we were winning some championships. So the factories, I think, were looking my way.
Right. So as you're going along, you can kind of shift a little bit into, we talked a little bit about what motivated you. Kind of get into, if you could, what separated you and your motivation from the others, in your opinion, to keep, because like you said, you had a little bit of success, but you still hadn't broken out from the pack per se. You're moving along. You're steady Eddie. You're just moving along steady, right?
Yeah.
At what was different about you that kept you wanting to keep going further, no matter what?
Yeah, there's something, I guess there's certain people that have a certain amount of drive, it's up here and it's in here. You got to have a heart, and you have to have that passion and drive. And it was a learned type thing. I don't know that I had a lot more talent than anybody else, or I had more talent than anybody else. It's just a matter of really wanting it. And I always remember my dad, he would always tell me, if you want something bad enough, you can achieve it. But that just kind of just went in here and bounced off. They were just words, and I didn't really pay attention. But later on, I realized that there's really something to that, I guess, if you do, because then I started I just trained harder. I went out, I was thinking about what the others were doing. I wonder what the other guys are doing right now. So I'd go run a mile when I couldn't further, or do more setups when I couldn't. I didn't have to have somebody telling me. I just was going to do that to try and beat those guys the next weekend.
So it's getting about into something extra, always doing a little bit extra.
Just try to do something more.
Right, and we had talked about also process. It was all about the process, and not necessarily about an outcome per se, but there is a way to make sure you do things better, and that we call that the process. Is that accurate description?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, and same with bike setup. A lot of guys just would get on their bikes and they would just go. They just ride them as hard as they could. But I learned later on, hey, there's a lot to this. You can click suspension and change gearing and do many things to the bike to make it a lot more comfortable. And I really wanted to study that process as well. And that elevated.
Did you ever meet a guy named Tim O'Neill?
Yes.
Okay, so we do a driving school as part of depending on where you're going to go, he offers a great tactical driving school. And this is the first time I met him. And the one thing that broke him out to me as far as capability and why he was a champion in his racing career was the fact that he was a gearhead as well. He could tell what was wrong with the car right away and fix it right away instead of waiting for a mechanic. So you're saying more likely the same thing, right?
Yeah.
Is that you could tweak that bike and understand it from a mechanical standpoint versus just a rider standpoint.
Yeah, a lot of times you need a crew chief to help you along with that. But I really, for the most part, I knew what I wanted and I could feel it. And I thought, well, I need more rebound or less rebound or more compression or whatever it was, a stiffer spring. Or I just knew kind of this is what I want. And so maybe the same sort of thing.
Yeah. I think so. This always resonated with me that if you know the full package of what you have going on, you can't help but be better at the end of the day, because you can confidently and articulately explain and figure out what's wrong and fix it.
And the guys who are really at the top level worked hard at it and tried to understand it and asked a lot of questions, which I did, to the engineers and Japanese engineers, and why do you make it this way? Why do you So I asked a lot of questions.
How were the team engineers? Did they ask you a lot of questions as well, or was it a two-way
Well,
street?
it depends at what point you're talking about. When I went over my first year, I was kind of I was studying.
Right.
But after that, I just told the guys what I wanted. And so we had a guy named Kel Carruthers at the time, and he was our crew chief, and then we had a couple mechanics. So the deal was you would come in after practice, you would say, this is what I want. You want the gearbox changed. I want it 50 revs lower in third gear. I want compression change. And so the shocks would go out and the forks would go out. And it would come back exactly how you wanted them. And the gearbox was done. The tires that you picked, you'd go through the tire selection with the Michelin engineers. And so it was just that. They just did what you said. So it wasn't so much, there was nothing to download like today. Everything's telemetry and data. Let's look at the data. The data is right here. It was your right wrist.
Right.
Yeah. And your lap time, they just go, well, you suck or you're quickest. It was that.
Right.
Yeah.
So did they ever do a kind of a debrief at the end of the day with you then? Or it was just really, you kind of figured out?
Always a debrief.
Always a debrief. Okay.
Yeah.
So you had that lesson learned type of.
As soon as you get off the bike, you'd have the tire guys would come in, the suspension guys would come in, Japanese guys took care of the engine, and then your two mechanics that, and the crew chief wrote down everything I said, and then I would go away and the bike would be a frame. And you left. And then an hour and a half later, you're on the track, and it was, everyone worked at such a high level. It was fun to be a part of that, where everybody you're working with is working up here at the peak, at the top. And it's fun to be a part of that. That's I guess, the perks of being a factory rider. You get to work with the best people.
Yeah, that kind of drove us to be into the SEAL teams as well. It is, once you get to that high level, it's really cool to see people that have that same passion.
Same similarities, I think. You know, that our team, and then you guys. I don't have any. You know, I never had bullets flying at me. You know, that's a whole different thing, and I have a whole different respect. But no, this is easy compared to what you guys did, for sure. You know, a lot of respect for you guys.
Right back at you, Eddie. That thing is. We'll talk about that.
But it's fun to work with that group of people.
Yeah.
That, you know, when you know, you're going to go do an op. I mean, everything is at the top level. You guys have the best equipment, the best people, the best trained, you know, group around you. The helicopter, the plane is ready. I mean, everything is ready, isn't it? It's really, for the most part,
not all the time, but
you know,
we have our days too.
Sure,
and,
sure.
But you know, one thing when I was reading about you back in 1988 and such, and as I was really learning motorcycles for myself for the first time. I hadn't ridden until then. I mean, I've always been a cyclist, a mountain biker, that kind of thing. So that was my first motorcycle. And what really struck me, that's why I was kind of pointing at this thing, but I remember they were talking about it in the day that the 500 cc's were pretty much had the reputation of being unrideable. They call it the unrideables. So how did you attack that when you were trying to figure out how to get on it and be effective at it?
Well, I guess funny story. I came from Superbike. And we had won 2 national championships with the Superbike. So I was real young and real cocky and thought, you know, I got this. And I got on a 500 for the first time. And I took off, and the thing I cracked the throttle open and it went straight up. And oh crap, and slammed the throttle, the front end came down, and I grabbed the brakes. Well, this thing was just stopped because it only weighed 200 pounds. And the ass end's in the air and my head's in the bubble. And I'm thinking, I went from cocky Superbike champion to, oh crap, I don't know how to ride one of these. It was that hard. It was that difficult. And you pick it up and you learn it again, you know, but I had 3 test sessions before I went to Europe to ride for the first time. So on a 500 that was mind-boggling fast. Now you think about that, a Superbike, 1,000 cc Superbike at the time was pretty fast, especially a built one.
Right.
And this thing would leave it for dead. That thing wasn't even in the hunt.
So what are some of the techniques you use to get into master that bike?
Yeah, it truly was throttle control, because if you crack the throttle at the wrong time, it would just pitch you up in the air and throw you off. It had a 3,000 RPM power band, and it would sweep through it so quick you couldn't even barely keep up with it. But the thing was, it would deliver all its power at 9,000. So as soon as you hit 9, if you're at 75 coming out of a corner at 8,000, it would hit with 150 horsepower at 9 and be done at 12. And so you can imagine how quickly that swept through that tack.
Yeah.
And so that's why the gearboxes had to be perfect. You had to gear it just perfectly. So we had drawers full of gears for each gear, all the way through. So you were constantly messing with that. So yeah, it was difficult to learn it, but once you kind of figured it out, it was easy to ride mid-pack, and then as soon as you started getting, top 10, it was getting harder, and then top 3, forget about it. My first year was, I did that twice, I think, or 3 times maybe,
just a level,
in my first year.
Level of precision and concentration.
Yeah, it was just, yeah.
What did you do to kind of improve, if you could, other than just the iterative process of working toward it? But any special techniques for like a concentration that you worked on, or what was kind of the secret sauce there?
Well, the real secret was seat time. Mm-hmm. The more you would jump on this thing and ride it, it would let you know what you were doing right and wrong real quick, real fast. And so that, and just the people that I was around, my teammate was Kenny Roberts. He's the one that brought me over. So you listen to him, you listen to his debriefs, and you listen to how they interact, and the engineers, and that's what helped me as well. So I would listen to these things and go, oh yeah, and it makes you, no different than you guys. You listen to your, your superiors, and you learn a lot of things. You
Right.
know, you listen to the Master Chief, and they're
Yep.
going to either chew you out or tell you what you should be doing. And
Right.
and it was the same for us, sort of. So that maybe the similarities are there. You listen to the guys who've been there and done that. You know.
Okay, Eddie, let's move on. You had mentioned Kenny Roberts. Tell me about Kenny and your experience.
Well, Kenny, he brought me over in '83. He said, you know, I think you're ready. You can do this. And, you know, I wasn't so sure, but I thought, well, he knows. Maybe I can. So, yeah, he's responsible for taking me over. And Kenny, he's a lot of fun. You probably had guys on your team that always screwing with you, constantly
At least one
messing
or
with
two.
you. Yeah, but at the same time, I'm sure when it comes down to it, when it's race time, they're gonna have your back and do their job,
Right.
you know. And so he was that for sure. He knew he'd already won 3 world championships, so that guy knew what he was doing. So when it came down to you know, the debriefs, like you say, and then afterwards, you know, we'd talk about. He was always serious as a heart attack, and he would tell me the truth. He always would tell me what I needed to do. And a lot of times, you know, he would, I'd be eating a donut, and then I learned about nutrition. He'd come over and slap the thing out of my, you know, hand, and he goes, "What the hell are you doing? Are you serious about this? Do you want to win? You know, do you want to win a race?
Nice.
You know?" So he was that kind of guy, and he goes, "You got to learn about this. You got to learn, you know, about training." And so that's when I started asking a lot of questions. So Kenny is responsible for me thinking about all of that. And because he was doing that at the time, he was one of the first riders to do it. And then I took it, I think, to another level, because I wanted to know about how the triathletes were training, how the cyclists were training, and motocrossers and what they ate, and you know. So I got into it pretty heavy, and so he was responsible for that. But what a joker! I mean, it was a tough '83 season with him. I was the first teammate he ever had, so he picked on me a lot. So he said it was mental toughness, and he's right. In the end, it was.
Well, give me some examples of how he picked on you.
Oh, well, you know, just how we would go to the races. We'd be in a motorhome, and we'd be driving these 35-foot motorhomes through downtown Paris somewhere, and he'd ditch me. And I didn't know where I was going. I had no idea. He just thought that was the funniest thing ever. See if you can get to the track. Talk about mental toughness. You're in a country, you could be in Yugoslavia with a motorhome. Nobody speaks English, and you don't know where you're at, and you're on a tiny little road, and you're far away from home. It gets pretty scary, you know. So yeah, he did a lot of things that he thought was funny. I didn't, but yeah, yeah, I was just one of many things. Yeah.
Take me through a typical Kenny Roberts debrief. What would he do at the end? Some of his techniques.
Well, he had been there since 70. I don't know when he went over there. 76, I think. But in 78, 79, and 80, he won his championships. Mm-hmm. So he'd already been there and done that. And so when he would come in, it was like the general showing up. You know, he would just bark orders, and then that was it. But it was pretty cool how he brought everybody in. He made the tire engineers. He would explain in detail what he thought, if the tire was the sidewall was too soft, or the rubber was working a certain way. And you know, so I would listen to that, and then he would just constantly on the Japanese about how slow the bike was. You know, and it was just horribly slow, and the carburation was terrible, and even if it was okay, it was terrible. You know, he had to tell them how bad it was, so they would be writing things down, and so yeah, it was just and how he went about the suspension was really pretty interesting, because he could pick things apart. Like, you know, he'd go, "Oh, I want a little bit more oil level in the front," and at that time, you know, you'd start thinking about all these different things. I want the spring slightly stiffer. I want the rebound a little bit slower. So there was a lot of things on the list, and then you go back out, and all of a sudden your lap time was a little bit quicker, you know, and right. And I was just kind of following along, but then I understood why he was doing that. You know, the things I could feel it. Oh, I understand why you did that. You know, not everything he did. He liked the ass end of the bike way high, and I liked mine down.
Sure.
I liked to get the drive, but he wanted it to flick real quick. So we had two different riding styles. So not everything was exactly like I couldn't just take his setup and put it on my bike, but pretty close. Yeah.
So and when you said you felt you took it to another level once you learned the ropes a little bit. What did you do a little bit differently to raise the bar a little bit?
Well, with the training for sure,
Okay.
and nutrition, and yeah, the bikes kept getting faster,
Sure.
and the technology kept getting better. So yeah, and I would really think about it. I mean, I was so laser focused when I was off the bike. That whole week to the next race was just nothing but you couldn't even talk to me. I was just concentrating on the next race and what I had to do. So yeah, I was kind of wired that way. I don't know. It just started getting, you just started thinking about points and how you were going to win this championship. You know, in the relationships, it didn't matter. You know,
it was about mission
yeah,
focus.
it was mission. Yeah.
So where did you see that when you started doing some of the better training and the better nutrition? How did that affect you? What did you see first, or right up front when you started doing different and better training and nutrition?
Yeah, well, that was fun because you could see the difference. A lot of the riders weren't doing that at the time, not to my level anyway. And I could see at the end of the race, my lap times were the same as in the beginning, and that's where it showed.
Yeah.
You know, I could run the fastest lap on the last lap. And that's not easy to do on a 500. You know, you're pretty wore out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was worth the training right there. Just that alone was why I went crazy at it. I know you can't tell now I'm fat and out of shape, but at that time in my 20s,
I think you're a handsome and powerful man.
Oh, there you go. Thank you very much. But yeah, at the time I was, all in.
Yeah. Right on. So with that kind of comment in focus right there, tell me a couple of times where you kind of hit rock bottom, if you will, and what did you do to kind of work yourself out of those issues?
Yeah, well, there was times when you wanted to ring the bell. Yeah, I fell off one time when the brake pads fell out, and I had no front brake, and I shattered my ankles, and yeah, you think. It's easy to just go, okay, I've had enough. I don't know that I need to do this anymore. You're hurt. You're just, you're at home and you just think this is, you're down there. So, but there's something, again, there's some people that just have something here and something here that says, nope, I'm not going to quit. I'm not going to give up. I can, climb back up. So, one way is when that happened, the guy left a clip off the pin and the pin came out. And so Kenny came in, he goes, well, we're going to fire that guy. He's fired. And I said, nope, from now on, he's the only one that works on my brakes. And Kenny was like, what? I said, yeah, he's the only one that touches my brakes from now on. So if you do that, I think he will never, ever make that mistake again. That'll never happen. But yeah, there's times back in the Superbike days, I fell off and I broke C7, and I was in a brace, and so they go, well, we don't know that you're ever going to be able to race or this and that. And I don't know. I willed myself back. It was like we were at the bottom where you think, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't do this anymore. But
So how long, just to give you some context, with the ankle brake and with the back brake, how long did it take you to get back up to actual operational speed?
Well, early on when I did my neck, I was out a month, and I just trained with my legs and got blood flow, and I did all these things they said you should do, and they said, but you can't move your neck, you can't move your head. Well, I can move everything else. So, I just willed myself back, and the guy put the x-ray up after a month, and he goes, I can't believe it, but yeah, you can go race. And we finished out the season. We won the rest of the races and actually won the championship.
Wow.
That year. So coming from down low, you can pull yourself out of the mud and
About motion,
Yeah.
just keeping that body
yeah,
moving, right?
yeah. I get no different than you guys. I'm sure you get shot and you go, no, I'm not. It's just because I got shot doesn't mean I can't be a SEAL anymore.
Right.
You know,
I've had
yeah.
both knees and both shoulders
There you
operated
go.
on. I've had both
Yeah.
eardrums blown out. I mean,
Yeah.
so. But
You
there
didn't quit.
No, it was never not even a question.
Right. Exactly. Right. Yeah.
Right. So cool. One thing I kind of want to touch on here. I'm a little eclectic when it comes to some of the categories I talk about, and one of them is I call it Forrest Gump. After the character, Tom Hanks' character, right? And the reason I call it Forrest Gump is we've all had opportunities or moments in our life when we truly just kind of backed our ass into something and
Sure.
it turned out wonderful. Don't know why, but you were given a gift. You have a couple examples of that, and how did you turn just a happenstance chance into something that was really cool?
Probably all my factory rides, but with the exception of '89, not one I pursued. But yeah, my first factory ride was really kind of like that.
On what bike were you racing at the factory?
Well, at the time, I was down at a super bikers event, and it drugged the pipes. It lifted the back wheel off the ground, and I crashed, went into the hay bales, and broke some ribs. So I'm in the motorhome, in the Shell's motorhome, and in walks Gary Mathers from Kawasaki. He was a racing manager at the time, and I had broken ribs, and I saw him, and I just sat right up, and hey, how's it going, Gary? He goes, are you okay? I went, I'm fine. He goes, oh, well, we wanted to offer you a tryout in a couple of weeks at Willow Springs. I said, I'll be there. And so I showed up with broken ribs and ended up getting my ride somehow. Who knows? But it was, a bit like that, So, yeah, it can happen.
Now, how about, I was actually wanted to ask you too about how and why you made the transition. You were only, at the time, you were the first guy to change factory rides from, it was from Yamaha to Honda, right? Mm-hmm. And you were also at that time the first one to win back-to-back championships by doing that. What caused that to happen, and what do you attribute the success that you had with the second bike?
Yeah, it was a scary thing to leave a team you won 3 world championships with. I'd been with them for 6 years. I knew everybody by first name. They were like brothers and sisters to me. I mean, everybody was just that tight. Mm-hmm. And so to say, I'm going to drop all this, go to a bike that I don't know and a team nobody I know, to a manufacturer I don't know, was tough. It's a scary thing. I thought, well, either this is going to end my career and this is going to end badly, or, maybe not.
What was the motivating factor getting going there?
Everybody on the team was awesome, but the team owner at the time and I saw things completely different. We just saw it differently, and it was time to try something else. And I was at that point where I thought, well, we'll see what happens. It's, it's going to be good or it's going to be really bad. And as it worked out, I went with Irv. I did know Irv Kanemoto, and he's an awesome guy, and just amazing guy. He works so hard. And you talk about work ethic. I mean, he just was, I don't think he ever slept. He was just worked. And if I had a bad race, he'd go, oh, I know it's the bike. Don't worry about it. I know it was the bike. We'll make it better. And I'm like, no, Irv, I got my ass handed to me today. Those guys were faster than me, and no, it was the bike. We'll make it better. And so you gave 110, for a guy like that.
Totally.
So, yeah, and they worked hard, and in the end, we ended up winning the championship.
Go through the same methodology you did with the previous team.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what made you, in your opinion, better at that point when you won the championship again?
I had a lot of races under my belt. Okay. We had 3 world championships and 6 years of racing. So I knew the tracks. I knew how you go about setting up bikes. Even if the bike was completely different, I still knew, I think, what I wanted. And and we directed Honda to, can we do this? Can we do that? And they did it.
How different were the bikes for you?
They were a lot different. The power band was completely different. It had a lot of top speed, and needed to work on drivability, and the chassis needed a lot of work. And Honda worked so hard, they made 13 chassis in 1 year, which is just unheard of. Yamaha would do 1 if you were lucky.
Wow.
Yeah, so that was the difference between them and who I was riding for at the time.
Yeah, a little working harder to make it happen.
Yeah.
Wow. All right. So how long did you stay with them? Did you stay with them until the retirement? Or?
No, I stayed with them 1 year.
Okay.
There was an issue with the contract and money. They just didn't want to pay. They couldn't step up with what Marlboro was at the time. It was triple, and it was hard to turn that down. I didn't want to leave, but you know, when your money's 3 times, you just have to do something else.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't want to.
And was that your last year? You had one more championship after that, right?
No, that was it. That was my last year.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that. Once you're after, because we're getting into basically cleansing your soul, right? So anyway, that's again, I have some funky categories.
Right.
But as you're getting out of the Grand Prix racing, what were you looking at as far as how to continue with the passion you have and continue on with it? Were you looking at total retirement at that point, or were you looking at this something different to do after you get out?
Yeah, I knew I was done with the racing because it was mostly the travel wore on you, and you probably know about that. And you know, after I would do 50 international flights a year. If you weren't racing, you were testing and you were doing PR. So you were doing something and you were flying somewhere. They had you flying somewhere. And after a while, after 10 years of it, it's like, okay, this is enough. You know, I've had enough of it. But yeah, you know, I found car racing by accident, and it's the Forrest Gump thing again, I guess. And somehow ended up in an Indy Lights car, and we did well. And so the IndyCar team saw me, but it was not funded very well, and so the car wasn't up to snuff. But yeah, I did part of a season in IndyCar, and I enjoyed that. But then after that, I knew I need to re-enter back into Earth's atmosphere and come back to the real world. And now you don't get to play with everybody on that high level that they work at, you know, the work ethic. You come back to every day, you know, Julie's telling me to go take the trash cans down to the curb, you know, that. I went from
Mr. World Champion.
Yeah, exactly.
You got to take the trash down at the end of the
exactly.
driveway.
I don't care how many championships you won. Take the trash out. Yeah.
Okay, Eddie. Another one of my weird sections. You know, we all have had that part of our life where we're sitting here, we're banging our head against something because we had a challenge we just cannot solve. Then we have the Eureka Moment. Oh, now I got the answer. Right. Tell me about a couple of those moments for you when you've solved the unsolvable and kept pressing ahead.
Yeah, you know, it was 1986, actually. Up to that point, Freddie Spencer was the guy to beat. And Freddie had a way of, back then, we had no tire warmers. And so the tires were just ice cold. You're sitting on the line, and they were hard as a rock. And compared to today, they're amazing. I mean, the street tires are better than what we raced on. And so getting the tires up to temp and getting those first 2 laps in was really difficult. And Freddie was amazing at it. He was really good. He would get out there and get away. And up to that point, so I remember sitting on the line. This was 86 at Salzburg, Austria. And I sat there and I said, I'm going with him. I'm going to pass him on the first lap, or I'm going to crash. I don't care. I don't care. I was that mad about it. You know, it was like, I have to learn how to go on these cold tires. And it was a breakthrough. It was actually, I went for it and realized if you push it, and it was a little hairy the first couple corners, but if you pushed them hard, and you could get them up to temp pretty quickly, instead of the 2 laps that I was doing, you could do it in 3-4 corners. And it was hard to get yourself to push through that and do it. And he brought my level up to
That's
where I
awesome.
needed to be.
Yeah.
And that was a breakthrough moment because that was difficult to do, really difficult. But I just said, I'm going to crash. I don't care. I'll just crash. But I'm staying with him. One of two things are going to happen in this race. So that was a big breakthrough. And after that, we were winning a lot of races.
Wow. So do you guys try to copy that? Did they catch on to it? Or
I
they
don't
just
know
oh,
that they
Eddie's just a
did. I wasn't
crazy
going to
dude.
share it.
Right.
Loose lips sink ships.
Yes,
And
sir.
I never shared anything. I was pretty tight-lipped about things.
Was your crew pretty tight-lipped?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So you guys,
Yeah,
I'm sure,
absolutely.
like a little tribe.
Yeah.
And they kind of
Yeah.
keeping things
No,
together.
everything. The GP camp was everything was behind tents. It was kind of sad because spectators really didn't get to see a lot because everything was closed up. Nobody talked, and then if you did talk to a journalist, oh, we heard you got new carburetors. Oh, I don't know nothing about that. You'll have to ask the crew chief. I don't know. And they'd ask, we heard you got new cylinders or new parts. And I said, well, I don't know anything about that. You've been asking for months to get them, but yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, it was, no different than you guys. I don't think you don't talk about what you do.
No.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. Great. So let's get into post-racing career for Eddie. I always like to talk about, for me, I grew up in the way I found a way to, I call it soul cleansing, the way to kind of get back and recenter. For me, it was always growing up being outside. I always hiked, I fished, I hunted, and things like that. When I turned 30, I learned how to surf, and that was my Eureka moment. It was like when I had that first ride on a face of a wave. A whole new world opened up for me, and it basically kept me in the water till to this day. And my whole goal in life is to surf when I'm 90. Yeah. So what does Eddie do now to kind of cleanse his soul, to keep the motivation going every morning? Why do you get up every morning, and how do you make a difference out there every day in this?
Yeah, well, I kind of have to go back to early racing days. Is when I was training hard, we'd go ride a bicycle up a mountain for 3 hours, and it was hard to get off the couch to go do that. But you'd go do it, and when you came back, you realized it was just like, oh, everything is right with the world.
Yeah.
You just that feeling of I did it, and I feel great. I feel so relaxed, and there was something about, I don't know what it does to you, but you just are like, oh, this is awesome, just feels so good. And so today, ran into Lou, and I hadn't done that for quite a while. When I retired, I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna eat pizza and, be fat. But then I ran into Lou, and it's great because he'll get me out there, and it's easy to sit on the couch. Lou calls up, are we gonna ride tomorrow? I'm like, well, you know how hot it is outside? He goes, yeah, it's hot. I'll see you at 7. So I'm so glad that, Lou is doing that type of thing. 2 days later, Lou, there's a monsoon out there. Yeah, there's a monsoon. Yep, we're going to get wet. Let's go.
Yep.
So that's great. And then after you do it, like you say, there's just that calm and relaxed, and you feel good about, you can start the day again. Okay, everything's right with the world. I can do this.
Now, do you guys, I know I saw the commercial about the electric bike. Do you kind of split time on electric and a regular, or is it electric bike right now?
Well, it started out on the pedal bike, and now for me, a lot of electric. Yeah. No, this winter, when it cools down, I'll probably get back out there. I don't want to, but I'll be back. He'll drag me out there and make me ride my pedal bike. So, yeah. But yeah, that's, you do. I go ride my motocross bike, and at the end of the day, you just think, oh, everything's right with the world. You had a good workout, and you hurt every muscle in your whole body for 3 hours, but now it's all good, Yeah. So
outstanding. So as we're kind of coming close to the end here, I always ask everybody, what's their top 3 scars in life and why? So over to you, sir.
Oh boy, yeah. I don't know. My grandfather gave me a little plaque over there, and those 3 things say it all. I didn't realize it until, unfortunately, he passed away, and I can't show him that I understand this. I don't know if you can grab that. I would love to show it to you. I love the meaning. It's this thing right here. And so these three things.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. And you get older and you realize in life that this has a lot of meaning, especially for you SEALs.
Okay.
This, I think, for sure, this is kind of, it says, dream and the future takes form, believe and you're halfway there, work and climb to fulfillment.
Oh my God.
So, people have a whole bunch of these, they're probably everywhere, but it wasn't until just lately I saw that and I went, wow, those are three things that you just, that really has a lot of meaning.
Yeah, so
it really does. And I wish I could tell him I understand that now.
Man,
so,
I think he's hearing you already.
Yeah.
That, Eddie, that is truly wonderful.
Yeah.
That is so awesome. This has been a great conversation today. I think a couple of buddies of mine are going to be really jealous. I got time and opportunity to come talk to you. Thanks. But it's been a true pleasure. I look forward not only to seeing you in the future, because I'm gonna come visit Lou, so we're gonna go fishing.
All right, good.
And I'm gonna challenge you to have a pedal bike, because I'll bring my bike out here too.
Perfect.
And thank you so much for hosting us today.
Thank you.
And thank you for everything you've done, and appreciate you, and look forward to seeing you again.
Much. Appreciate it.
All right.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.